On this episode, we travel to Adelaide, South Australia, where a laboratory does crash tests for pedestrians. Then we talk with the inventor of an energy-absorbing bollard. We head east to Canberra, where the Australian Capital Territory is lowering residential speed limits. A local bicyclist organization would like to see more speed limits lowered. In Melbourne, streets designated as share zones keep cars close to walking speed. Research demonstrates why lower vehicle speeds are good for pedestrians. In Sydney, we talk with the chairman of the Pedestrian Council of Australia. Finally, a manufacturer near Perth discusses automatic traffic counters. Stay tuned. We're talking with Jack McLean, who's director of the Road Accident Research Unit at Adelaide University. What is the research unit?
The Road Accident Research Unit exists to conduct research to find out why road crashes happen and ways of preventing them, and in particular how injuries occur in crashes and ways of minimising the severity of injury.
What's this machine behind us here?
It's a headform launcher for firing an instrumented headform. We use it mostly to simulate pedestrian collisions with cars. Pedestrians, contrary to the common terminology, don't get run over, they get run under by a car. And the head of an adult pedestrian usually hits the car towards the back of the hood or on the windshield.
Where would a child pedestrian hit the car?
Further towards the front of the car. You can get a fairly accurate prediction by standing in front of a car and rolling over onto it. And where your head touches the car, that's where the head hits in a collision.
What sort of other tests are done for pedestrian crashes?
Here in this facility we have a test that simulates the leading edge of the hood of the car striking the upper leg pelvis area, and another test which simulates the lower leg, including the knee joint, being struck by the bumper of the car.
How will these tests be put to use? Are they required anywhere?
They're not required yet, although in Europe at this time there are very serious discussions going on as to whether to put up to the European Parliament a recommendation that a new car safety standard be introduced for pedestrian protection using these tests. We are conducting tests for Australian NCAP, similar to the United States NCAP New Car Assessment Program, which up until now has been directed at occupant protection, barrier crash tests, cars, side impact tests, and it's only been comparatively recently in Europe and now in Australia that we're assessing the extent to which a car protects a pedestrian in the event of a collision.
A lot of your cars nowadays, people stick bull bars on the front. How do those affect pedestrians?
Generally badly, but it need not be so. In Australia, there is at least one bull bar on the market that, in many respects, is safer than the front of the conventional sports utility vehicle, being the vehicles that bull bars are mostly fitted to. But there is still quite a long way there is a lot of potential, should I say, in that type of bar to make them even better. The traditional steel bull bars are awful. They do protect the front of the car in the case of an animal strike, but they greatly increase the risk of severe injury to a pedestrian.
I guess there's been a certain amount of controversy here in Australia with bull bars. How's that being addressed?
The various state governments, Australia, as with the United States, legislation tends to be state-based rather than nationally. Various state governments are investigating the regulation of bull bars, and the Australian Standards Association has a committee which is very close to recommending a code of standard practice for bull bar design, which does take into account, to some extent, pedestrian protection.
And the data from these tests that you conduct here, bull bar manufacturers or automobile manufacturers, how would they take the data you get from a test like this? Would they use that?
The proposed standard includes a requirement for testing to simulate a impact on the head of a child pedestrian by the top rail of the bull bar, and to be able to claim compliance with the standard, a manufacturer would have to design the bar to pass that test, which is very similar to the requirement that is being discussed in Europe at the present time for the design of the car itself. But we also, as resources become available, conduct our own testing and publicise the results in the hope that bull bar manufacturers will, or to assist bull bar manufacturers to make their bars friendlier for pedestrians.
We're in Adelaide talking with Brad Zivkovic with Automotive Safety Engineering. What is automotive safety engineering?
Our company is involved in designing and testing of automotive products, mainly safety related. And they could be airbags, seat belts, crash barriers, and recently bollards as well.
And traditionally, what has a bollard consisted of?
In the past, bollards were made out of wood, cast iron, cast aluminium, and all the wrong materials for that application.
And what would happen when a car ran into one at speed?
I think most of them actually car will knock down with speeds over below 10 kilometers per hour or 6 miles per hour.
And you've sort of recreated the bollard with something you call the urban crash barrier. What have you done different?
That is correct. Actually, what we've done, we did create a design and incorporate very thick-walled tube made out of carbon steel that doesn't fold easily, even at impacts of 60 kilometers per hour. And we also had to extend base of the bollards from only a few hundred millimeters below the ground to over 1 millimeter depth to transfer the load during impact.
How does it differ from just sticking a heavy steel pipe in concrete?
It's more complex actually, so than just sticking a rigid object in the ground, because a rigid object in the ground can then increase injuries of vehicle occupants. So our task was a lot more complex. What we had to do, prevent car from hurting people behind the bollard, but at the same time I designed bollard that can absorb significant amount of energy from vehicle during impact and reduce inertial forces inside the car. So our bollards deform and can absorb up to 50% of the vehicle impact.
And behind us we have a sidewalk cafe with glass windows near a road. We've got some of your bollards there. How do they work in an application like this? Why are they important there?
Exactly. If we remove now bollards from this area, what could happen if vehicle impacts these toughened glass panels? Not just the vehicle will hurt people, but also fragments of the shattered glass. What our bollards do, they are about 1 meter in front of the glass panels, and they prevent vehicle getting in contact with the fragile glass panels and protect people dining behind it.
What sidewalk cafes are an obvious application for this sort of barrier. Where else could they be used?
We found in the meantime many other applications wherever car out of control can hurt people that are in direct line with impact. And applications are bus stops when people are waiting for the transport. They could be schools with children playing inside the playgrounds, kindergarten, houses at accident black spots known for previous history of accidents, and then many other objects like vital telecommunication, sort of junction boxes, telephone boxes, and many other applications.
We're in Canberra talking with Robin Anderson, who's manager of road safety for ACT Urban Services. What does a manager of road safety do?
I'm responsible for, all the regulatory aspects of road safety, including road safety education, driver licensing and behaviour, and promotion and evaluation of road safety measures.
What happens midnight tonight?
At midnight tonight, the ACT moves to a 2-year trial of 50 kilometre per hour residential speed limits. This follows successful implementation of such speed limits in other major Australian states, and we're hoping that a similar program in Canberra will also bring down road crashes and increase residential amenity in our suburbs.
What has been the impact going from 60 to 50 in the other jurisdictions?
There's been a lot of research and evaluation on those changes, and the most thorough was a 2-year evaluation of the lower speed limits in New South Wales. It showed a 16% overall reduction of crashes in the lower speed zones, but most impressive was the dramatic reduction in pedestrian crashes, which went down a massive 60%. Other vulnerable road users, in particular cyclist crashes, fell by 40%, and crashes involving older road users fell by 30%, so they were very worthwhile gains.
Is that the sort of thing you'll be looking at in 2 years when you evaluate the change?
Very much so. The bottom line has to be, will we reduce road trauma on our roads? One of the, I guess, reasons why it's a trial in the ACT is that ACT as a totally planned city has a far more structured hierarchical road arrangement than most other large cities, and we're trialling the road limits to see if the same gains can be, will occur in our planned hierarchy, where many of the residential areas are separated from higher speed arterial roads.
And there are a couple places where you have an even lower limit. What would those be?
Okay. We also have for a long time had lower speed zones and around primary and high schools. There's a 40-kilometre speed limit restriction around schools from 8 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And people are very used to those. They slow down because they recognise that child safety on the roads is very important, and by and large they do the right thing. Those lower zones will stay in place during the 50-kilometre change.
We're in Canberra talking with Neville Rees with Pedal Power ACT. What is Pedal Power ACT?
Well, we're a group in Canberra that looks after cyclist interests. We try and get better facilities for cyclists in Canberra, try to make cycling safer and get more people on their bikes.
What sort of things are you trying to get done? What sort of facilities do bicyclists need?
We need on-road cycling lanes. We've got a really excellent off-road cycle network in Canberra, but on the roads it's a bit dangerous. We need separated lanes from cars.
One of the things that happened first thing this morning was new speed limit went into effect. How's that going to affect bicyclists?
Well, the speed limits are being reduced in residential areas, and they were supposed to be introduced into the feeder streets in those residential areas as well. Now they're the particular streets that concern us, because they're going to stay at 60 kilometres an hour, which is a little bit, or quite a bit more than the residential speed limit in the States, I think, which is 30 miles an hour, is that right? We're about 30 miles an hour is about 48 here, so our new recommended speed limit for residential areas is going to be 50 kilometres an hour, but the government in its wisdom has decided that in these streets, which are main feeder streets, which buses use, which schools are on, and ovals and playgrounds, they're going to stay at 60. So we're not too happy with that, because as cyclists, we're vulnerable, exactly the same as pedestrians are, and we want the speed reduced to a safe speed for all residents and all users of those roads.
We're in Melbourne talking with Philip Jordan, who's Principal Road Safety Engineer with Vic Roads. Typically, how are the different modes, pedestrians and automobiles, treated on a situation like a freeway or a pedestrian mall?
If you think of the three basic concepts that we have, John, you've got segregation of pedestrians and motor vehicles, and segregation at one end of the spectrum is freeways where pedestrians are simply not allowed on a freeway.
Yeah.
At the other end, in a pedestrian mall where the cars are not allowed in and it's pedestrians only, so that's segregation.
Okay.
Then you can have separation of vehicles from pedestrians. You can separate them either in terms of time, which is what we do with traffic signals, where you push the button, the red comes up to the drivers, the pedestrians have their own time to cross the road. Or the other part of separation is to give them spatial separation. And you can see this where we build out curb extensions or where you put physical refuges or medians in the middle of the road so the pedestrians have got their own space to stand on. You then come to the third concept, which is integration, where you accept the fact that the pedestrians, the cars are all going to have to mix, and you try to regulate that in such a way that you control the speed of the vehicles, and you have very clear laws also as to who goes first and who doesn't. And we're standing here in a shared zone. We have a shared zone sign behind us. And this is a classical example of, if you like, ideas that we've looked at in Holland, which we've brought to Australia now. We've modified for our own particular development here in Melbourne. And in this shared zone, drivers are required to travel at 10 kilometres per hour. That's the speed limit. They are restricted in terms of where they can park. They can only park in set bays. And they are required to give way to the pedestrians all the way along this little street. And so you've got a situation where the child pedestrians who typically want to be out playing on the street with their friends, etc., they at least have this added security of knowing that drivers are required to be travelling slower and giving way to them.
How many of shared zones like this are in the Melbourne area?
The last count I knew of was less than a dozen. Most of them, to be honest, have been put in for commercial reasons in shopping centres, little back laneways which have become popular with bars, with shops, with places for people to sit and have coffee, etc., where there is still a need to take the through traffic through to service the backs of shops and office apartments and the like, and yet the pedestrians need that added little sense of security. So there's probably a dozen in the metropolitan area of Melbourne. There are more going in all of the time. They are a reasonably expensive device to put in because, as you can see, there's quite a lot of landscaping goes on. They have to be made to look attractive, and that costs a lot of money. So compared to most other concepts, this idea of a shared zone is a relatively expensive idea.
Do you think there's a big future for this concept in Australia, or do you think you'll go with other methods of dealing with traffic and pedestrians?
Well, my state of Victoria already has a 25-year record of achievement in terms of local area traffic management, where we have been trying to slow down the traffic in these local streets. Taking it that extra step and actually making a local street into a shared zone is a high cost but an important step. I can see more shared zones going in this state, but on a very small number each year. And I think it'll be continuation of some of the slow points in the other streets, things like road humps and roundabouts, chicanes, coupled with the recently introduced 50 kilometre per hour limit. And I think all of those together will end up with a better mix of pedestrian and motor vehicle interaction and integration in the local street system.
Going from 60 to 50 kilometers per hour is roughly equivalent to going from 35 to 30 miles per hour. An Australian study a few years ago concluded that going from 35 to 30 miles per hour could reduce pedestrian deaths by a third, but that going from 35 to 25 miles an hour could reduce pedestrian deaths by 2/3. 25 miles an hour is a common speed in U.S. residential neighborhoods. Some places, like Boise, Idaho, have 20-mile-an-hour limits. The Australians are off to a good start, but they could go a little farther. The 6-mile-an-hour shared zones or the 10-mile-an-hour home zones being developed in the United Kingdom are both based on the Dutch Woonerf model, where you slow cars down to close to walking speed and have pedestrians and automobiles share the street rather than have the street turned over to the automobile. Why is speed so important? Well, as we mentioned, it's critically connected to the death rate. At 20 miles an hour, only 5% of pedestrians will be killed in a crash. At 30 miles an hour, that jumps to 45%. At 40 miles an hour, 85% of pedestrians will be killed, and virtually all the survivors will have severe injuries. On top of that, at lower speeds, a lot of crashes can be avoided altogether. As the public service announcement in the United Kingdom says, kill your speed. We're in Sydney, Australia, talking with Harold Scrooby, who's chairman of the Pedestrian Council of Australia. What is the council?
We're a group of organisations formed to, our major objectives are the safety, the amenity, the access and the health of pedestrians throughout Australia.
What are some of the big issues you're dealing with at the moment?
Well, some of the interesting issues would include, for instance, bull bars on cars. I'm sure you have them in the States. People who stop in pedestrian crossings, the speed limits around schools and around shopping centres generally. We have a number of events we run each year, such as the Walk to Work Day and the Walk Safely to School Day. And we just generally have a lot of other issues, particularly related to our increasing pedestrian death toll in Australia.
How bad is your death toll here?
In Australia, on average, each year we kill about 350 pedestrians and we maim, seriously injure that is, at least 10 times that amount.
You mentioned you've got a number of events you're working on at the moment. What are those?
The one we've been running for 3 years now, or walking if you prefer, is the Walk to Work Day. That has a number of benefits. If we can get people to use public transport and walk to work instead of taking their vehicles, we get a lot of benefits. Particularly, we get better health from the people who are walking more. We get less pollution in the air, and they're showing in Europe now that more people are dying from pollution than they are dying from motor vehicle crashes. We get improved traffic flows, and we get better public transport because more people use it. So that has a number of benefits, and it's going very well. We've had a lot of people participating, and more governments are getting involved as we promote this event.
The Walk to School event, how does that work?
Walk Safely to School Day is a brand new event, and it starts in April this year. That's a group of people, mainly from education and health, who are wanting to get the children to learn more about road crossing skills. And we also want to try and reverse this trend of this cradle-to-grave idea that children and adults should be chauffeur-driven everywhere. We want children to understand the benefits of walking and health. But primarily, we want children to understand how to cross roads. And our research suggests that no child under 10 years old should cross any road unless they're holding the hand of an adult. So that'll be the primary theme we've produced in New South Wales, which is our biggest state in Australia. We've produced 500,000 tattoos, which children will wear on the day with their parents and carers and teachers, and they'll just promote the whole idea of holding someone's hand when they're crossing a road. But they'll also promote the idea that walking is good for you, and that if we continue the way we're going, just like you do in America, if we continue to be a sedentary nation, we're all going to be very obese in another 20 years, and governments won't be able to pay for that. Fat societies don't work well. In fact, a lot of costs to governments if people are poor at health or ill at health. So if we can start now and educate our children to understand the benefits of regular exercise, and that doesn't have to be, sweating and puffing every day. It just means regular, good exercise like walking. We're going to save our governments billions of dollars in years to come, and we're going to save us as we get older the taxes that we've earned and hopefully put away for our retirement.
We're in Fremantle, Western Australia, talking with Mike Kenny, who's Managing Director of MetroCount. What is MetroCount?
We're a traffic data counter manufacturer, and we specialise in new styles of instruments for picking up all the traffic flows around a city and in rural environments with portable traffic counters, the sort of thing that you see regularly with black strips running across the road in all countries around the world.
Now we've got one sitting right here. How does it work? What happens when a car goes over it?
Okay, basically you have a strip of rubber tube, hose as some people call it, that runs across the road. You have either a single tube for a counter, an axle counter, or as in our case we use two tubes, and that's a classifier, and it does more than just figure out the volumes of vehicles that are travelling past. It actually gets from the two tubes, you actually have the direction, the speed from the known distance that the tubes are apart. Then also you can get the wheelbase from working back from the speed and the axle movement over the tubes. Where we're a little bit different to traditional traffic counters is that we store every individual vehicle, and we work it out later on with software.
Now, supposing I wanted to figure out how many gaps there were that were big enough to let a pedestrian across the street, how would I do that then with a traffic counter?
Right, you would set in the analysis, because we have each individual vehicle stored, you can run back through the data and you can set a gap, for example, the first gap to be 4 seconds, followed up by gaps of 2 seconds thereafter, and look at the incidence of that in the entire traffic stream throughout that week or that day that you have the counter down on the road. And that will give you the numbers of times that pedestrians could cross over at a set of lights or across a road. Also, it would let you look at where a bicycle could get across the road or anything else with a known time needed to cross the road, even a wheelchair. If, for example, that took 10 seconds, you would set the setting in the software for a gap looking for 10 seconds, and only when you had that sort of occurrence in the data would you get an event, and you can look at the number of times that would occur during the period of the survey.
Visit us on the internet at www.pedestrians.org.